Mir geht gut. Geht sehr gut. Nee. Wo habt ihr die denn echt mal her? Also das ist ja...
You might wonder what kind of device this is. You've probably seen it before, even outside here. This might be a fashion wearable in the future, or workwear that a doctor or a teacher might wear in the future. My name is Martin Ott. I'm the Managing Director, Northern, Central, and Eastern Europe at Facebook. And I always very much look forward to being invited to speak in Berlin, my hometown. This is where I grew up. And this morning, actually, I was on the S-Bahn, and I couldn't help wondering, looking at the different people that are all sharing the same train. And on the S1, you always have one reader. There's always someone with a nose stuck in the book and kind of lost in the world. And then you have the students with the smartphones. And you have more of them these days. And then you also have the hardworking people. People with their briefcase in their hand or on their way to work in the workman's overall. And I kept wondering myself, do they really know what's going on right now and what's happening, not just starting today, and what it means for each and every one of us? What we're experiencing is an earthquake that is shaking the fundamentals of our economy to the ground and changing the rules of the world we live in. It's nothing less than the disruption of our entire economy. And it leads to new giants rising. It leads to new players and platforms. You know what, like that or not, but the matter of fact is, it is happening. I've experienced a bit of disruptive environments in my career, and I want to share some thoughts with you today. For me, the fundamental question is, how do companies navigate in these disruptive markets? And what does it mean for us as a society when everything that can be digitized will be digitized? 7 weeks and 1 day ago, something remarkable happened. Marty McFly and Doc Emmett Brown actually visited us from back in the future. And back in 1989, the second part of the movie came out. It was the most, craziest thing imaginable there. You actually had flat screens hanging all over the walls. How crazy is that? And then you actually had people talking to each other using video calls. This is crazy. Talking to someone who might be on the other part of the planet, and you actually see the person talking. Of course, since then, a lot has happened. The internet has become available to a much wider public. We've lived through a startup bubble and one financial crisis or other. And now you have the Internet of Things. You have Industry 4.0. And you have a mega trend that is gripping the entire world. You suddenly have software and IT engineering merging with electronic and mechanical parts. You have robots that are taking over more and more of our manual labor. The disruption is happening right now. And according to IMD and Cisco, it's already clear how it's going. So this digital disruption first, of course, happened in the technology sector itself, followed by entertainment, media, commerce, financial service, telecommunications, and so on. Here's an example from the postal service and communication sector. I actually read that postcards are now being replaced by social networks. I don't know if you remember when the last time you actually wrote a real postcard. I had a hard time doing it myself. And even we at Facebook, we disrupt ourselves. Messenger used to be part of our blue Facebook app. And then we realized that messaging is actually one of the few things in the world that people do more than social networking. And so we spun out our Messenger app into a standalone service with the goal of building a whole new open platform. And now you have great new services running on this. For example, P2P payments. Means when you go to a restaurant and want to split the bill, you don't have to divide cash anymore, do a bank wire later on. You simply take the messenger and send a payment on the messenger. We try to build an essential new communications platform for the world, but not only for people, but also for businesses and people to connect. Take the example of ordering a new sweater online. You actually might get your order status and a confirmation into your messenger, and then you can either change the color, reply if you have a question, no more waiting in a phone hotline, and no more emails being stuck in your spam folder or in your inbox. If you want, you can actually track the order status. This is great stuff. It's happening right now. But the real revolution is still to come. And we've seen the signs already 20 years ago. Remember Deep Blue? Watson? Deep Blue, the first of its kind, was a computer who beat the then reigning chess world champion Garry Kasparov in a one-off game in 1996. And a year later, in 1997, went on to beat him in a full tournament condition of 6 games. The second of its kind proved itself on a much wider footing, actually beating the Jeopardy champions in a game which required much more general knowledge. This is the real revolution. The future is not so much about anymore that machines are replacing our physical work. Machines will be taking over cognitive, the brain work. And they're not going to replace us. The one thing, though, that the tricky part is with artificial intelligence, that's what it's fundamentally about, is that we're trying to teach machines things that we've human made very much our own, and much more than any species on this planet. It's learning. Mark Zuckerberg actually gave my colleague Jan LeCun a carte blanche to build ideally one of the best AI research labs in the world. And Jan and his team, they're looking at learning, the process of learning. And you might ask yourself, what does artificial intelligence look like today? How it's being used already? And Jan and his team, they are studying, for example, the process of object recognition. And one example at Facebook working today is that you can actually read images to the blind user. Another example, translations under the Facebook post, and over 300 million people have used that already. And if you were actually the one clicking on the translation link first, you were the one initiating AI, because recognizing language pattern in a true sense is a very complex matter. This is, though, just the beginning. As in the reality, there's actually still humans training the machines in the back. Now, artificial intelligence is an extension to our brains, just like cars an extension to our legs. It's not going to replace us, but it's just going to make everything different and amplified. So the question is, if machines become intelligent, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for our jobs? What does it mean for the skill sets that we need in the future? Are we going to see a master of artificial intelligence or a master of Industry 4.0? When it comes about jobs and career choices, actually, the fact that I'm standing here today is not part of a big plan or predetermination. Things could have turned out very differently for me. 1997, that's me. I was actually here in Berlin taking then the medical university entrance exams, Mediziner test for the Germans of you. My dad was a doctor. I got accepted at Humboldt University. He was a doctor, so my career plan was already passed out. I was well on my way into the healthcare system. Last minute, I decided to choose my own path. So I could have become a doctor. If things turned out differently, I might have trained as a nurse. But I actually ended up in a tiny village in German Rhine River Valley near Koblenz at WHU in Fallenda. And then a bit later, you suddenly had all those startups jumping up, the new economy. And so I was faced actually with two main options. Either like 75% of my former fellow students become a management consultant, or maybe a trader at an investment bank, or become an entrepreneur myself. Now, when you think about, with artificial intelligence, Industry 4.0 in mind, with hindsight, what career choice should the Martin Ott of 15 years ago have taken? Doctor, a nurse, a consultant, a trader at an investment bank, an entrepreneur? Have a guess yourself, which one is the first to disappear? It is unfortunately bad news for some of my former fellow students. The trader has already been replaced partly by smart machines. And even when you think about the doctor, think about NetDoctor and the like, or someone like me who goes to a doctor and before has probably done web research and comes there with his own diagnosis and probably the medication he wants. So done by some basic web research, so on the back of some machines. So you think about this, the doctor won't be like completely disappear, of course, but the way they work will fundamentally change over the next decade or so. But think about the nurse, maybe a caretaker for the elderly. They won't be replaced so easily by machines. Or like a plumber climbing underneath a sink. So we could continue with this game for some time. I'd rather focus now on the qualities that I think is going to be important for people in the future. I actually decided to become an entrepreneur as well. So that was my choice. I ended up in my first business starting a consumer review platform actually in Japan. These were exciting times. Writing the business plan, even choosing the company name, and then suddenly having your first business card, first business contact. Suddenly I was CEO. But what really mattered was that I learned to take an idea and turn it into an offer that hasn't existed before and then bring it to market. And then learn, of course, in a startup and in startup environment as an entrepreneur what it does to give it everything really to succeed. Now, the biggest issue we had initially of my Japanese co-founder and myself, even for people taking us seriously. And in Tokyo, it was helpful to have a good business address in a fancy part of town. So even without owning a chair in an office, we got ourselves that address through a friend, and then got a Tokyo phone number, and back then still a fax number, and then actually routed all the calls to our cell phones as we were still operating out of our startup apartment way out of the city. So what I learned then was actually that problem-solving competence, so identifying problems, coming up with a unique way and solutions, is going to be a key thing also for the future. And fast forward, a few years later, and a couple jobs later, I actually started at Facebook. And you might ask yourself, why Facebook? And of course, I looked at the business model. Is it scalable? I looked at my personal learning curve. Is it steep enough? But the real reason why I joined Facebook was about the people. It is smart people, highly motivated people, and people that want to challenge the status quo and just don't, rest on it and drive forward. And when I think back to earlier parts of my career, it has always been about the people or the culture. Or in other words, if you look at what's really important, it's the core values of a company much more than the core competencies, which might completely change over time. You might have come across this or other slogans in the context of Facebook. Take 1% finished, for example. You might feel this way when you actually come into our offices. You see those pipes on the ceiling and exposed metal or stone walls, and it's all open space. We do it this way in order to keep reminding us that we're not finished yet. That we're still at the beginning of the journey, and we need to keep on our toes at all times. And so we have this open space office environment. Everyone sits in an open space. It feels still very much like a startup. And even Mark, He gets up once a week still, after 11 years in the company, once a week for a full hour for a Q&A with the people, and shares his vision and answers any question you might have. Move fast and be bold. This is what we want our colleagues to do in times of quick changes. At a time this actually read, move fast and break things. But some of our engineering colleagues took it too literally, as some of you might have seen with some outages in the past. But we do want our colleagues to take bold decisions. What would you do if you weren't afraid? And we want them to fail harder. It is important to make mistakes, because that's the way how you learn. And that's an important one. Nothing at Facebook is somebody else's problem. Each of us has a unique skill set to find a solution, or at least contribute to the solution, but we won't let it go you alone. So what we're seeing is that digital life is changing rapidly, yet the human behavior is adapting slowly. So if you're an organization that also wants to adapt to cultural change, similar to Facebook or others, there are some tools out there. One example comes from the financial service industry. The Royal Bank of Scotland, a huge financial institution, and they've actually just implemented Facebook at Work to 30,000 of their employees, with a plan to roll it out to 100,000 at the end of next year. And of course we use Facebook internally as a tool to work, and now we open it up for other partners as well to operate it in a secure environment. And so you have their newsfeed, you have groups, you have messages, you have events, and so on. So you actually create a transparency on the organization that everyone always has access to the right information and is only just a message away from the big boss. Talking about media today, and you also have the media industry embracing the change and being disrupted. And so we're working with, for example, our publishing partners. They have seen more and more people using their content from mobile devices, and so they've seen lots of more traffic actually coming from our newsfeed. But the user experience was very bad because you had long load times and you lost people along the way. So we built instant articles. And you preload the content so its access is available instantly, and you actually have interactive elements. And so it's a much nicer user experience. And of course we built this also in a way so we find new revenue opportunities for those partners in the future. And then take Facebook Signal as a tool for journalists. So you can take the pulse or see what's trending on Facebook, maybe to inform you for your next story. Or Facebook Mentions. That's an app where you can actually, celebrities or politicians or musicians, they can live stream video directly into the newsfeed. The change is happening fast, and even we at Facebook, we are not immune to that change. And we have this anxiety. And we have this fear. The biggest fear actually we have is that one day we'll become too big and too slow to be able to move fast. So I'm telling you, fear yourself. That's the only one you have to fear in times of digital disruption. And einfach machen. Sorry, it's hard to translate. It's not just do it. It's a German thing. It's also getting things done. So think about when products come to market and the time has already come before they launch. So you have in Berlin here this startup environment. You have the least viable product. Just get it done, get it out with. You have beta, which is okay. We at Facebook, we use our yellow app. That's an internal one where we test the different things. And don't fear criticism. You might learn something much more and more valuable that you could buy with any market research. And don't judge yourself from the competition. Who cares if you are faster than the second fastest? Disrupt yourself. You need to revolutionize your sector. Because the next startup might be not inside today that will disrupt you, but for sure it will come. And when you hear things like, we've always done it this way, alarm bells should be ringing. Because you should be rethinking your processes, your services, and potentially even your customer base. And break down functional barriers. This is something that we've learned at Facebook, that the specialists make the existing more efficient. But when you want new ideas, new solutions, you have to get a fresh view from a diverse group of people. The change is happening with or without you. And everything that can be digitized will be digitized. So don't be afraid of the change. Take a first step on that journey and embrace it. It will turn out well. And maybe one day in the future, when we look back and say, maybe back then, with or without Oculus, we were already able to see part of the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.